Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast, where it's all about turning your job search into a slam dunk. Your host is Angela Copeland.
Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Copeland. On the phone with me today, I have Tamara Murray. She's a digital nomad who runs a one-woman communications firm, Well-Rounded Communications, while traveling full-time for the past 2.5 years. Tamara is also the author of the book, Awesome Supervisory Skills, 7 Lessons for Young First-Time Managers. Tamara, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, I mentioned before we got started, I think there are going to be a ton of listeners that just cannot wait to learn more about what it's like to be a digital nomad. So I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm curious, so before we get started with my questions, where are you today?
Oh, that's a great question. I am currently in Greenville, South Carolina.
Wow.
Just got here yesterday. Yeah.
So what takes you to Greenville?
Well, we were, one of the things that we do in our travels is we chase warm weather.
Oh, okay.
And yes, and so I was in Gainesville, Florida for a conference earlier this month, and we just decided to start slowly making our way north as the weather improves. And then we're going to be spending some time in Asheville, North Carolina, doing some sightseeing and actually taking care of a farm for a week.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, I'm going to learn how to milk goats.
That's great. Well, so you're kind of alluding to it as we talk, but if anybody's listening who's never really heard of this term, digital nomad, how would you describe it?
Great question. So a digital nomad is essentially someone who, A, can do all of their work remotely, primarily, via the internet. And B, they're nomadic, so they are traveling either full-time or most of the time. They're on the move constantly. And so that's what makes a digital nomad different from someone who, say, has a remote position and works from home every day. They're really someone who is traveling full-time while they work.
That's so interesting. Well, so you mentioned you can do your job remotely, on the internet. Are there certain jobs that you've noticed that work better for sort of this lifestyle than others?
Yeah, there is, and there's a thread that really ties through all of those types of jobs, which is that they tend to be knowledge positions, right? So if there's nothing wrong with, working in a retail store or at a coffee shop, for instance, but, a service or customer service in-person position is really hard to do remotely. Now, that being said, there are definitely online customer service jobs, for instance. So it's not entirely knowledge-driven positions, but the majority tend to be. So folks who are maybe graphic designers or folks who run online retail businesses, folks who do coding, software engineering. I am a communications consultant, so I work with do-gooder nonprofit organizations and help them with their messaging and marketing materials. So that can happen pretty much anywhere. So there's not really a limit. It just is something that has to be able to take place online and by phone.
Yeah, absolutely. So did you do this kind of work before you became a digital nomad, or did you kind of change your career in order to become one?
That's a great question. So I personally, this has been my career for the past decade.
Oh, wow.
I've been working with nonprofits even before I graduated from college and helping them with their communications. And so, and I worked at a consulting firm doing this same work. So it was really easy for me to pivot and just strike out on my own and start my own one-woman communications shop. However, my husband, who, we travel together, he was in a very different position he did, budget analysis and accounting, auditing for a city government before we started traveling. And for him, that was not, working remotely was a no-go. Like maybe he could work from home, occasionally, but, he had to be in the office. So he really needed to find something different, and he ended up pivoting, and now he runs a couple e-commerce businesses that primarily sell products via Amazon.
That's so cool. That's really great. Well, so of the two of you, did one of you have the idea to become a digital nomad couple first, or were you kind of at the same time making this decision?
So we originally started off by just having this idea of taking a sabbatical.
Okay.
There's a lot of people who talk about the importance of a career break and how taking a break for a defined period of time, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, a year, and using that time to learn some new skills, see the world, try out different things, it can really refresh you. And while we were doing that, we were like, gosh, this is so great. How can we keep doing this? And that was what encouraged us to say, okay, how can we work while we travel?
So first of all, where was your initial trip, like your sabbatical? Where did you go?
We started primarily in Latin America.
Okay.
So we actually even brought our dog, our little dog with us. Yes, and so that influenced a lot of where we went, because it's not easy bringing a dog across international borders. There's a lot of paperwork and there's a lot. But so we spent some time in Mexico, Chile, Argentina, and Costa Rica. And now we travel in a minivan turned camper, primarily in North America.
Wow, that's so interesting. So when you decided, hey, we should make this into a lifestyle, this is really great, how long between the time that you thought about that and the time that you could actually do it? Like, how long did it take to kind of figure out how to make it happen?
Well, it was sort of a process, right? So we decided to do it, but then we started experimenting with different things. So I started taking on small freelance gigs just to see how it went. For me to be traveling while taking on projects. My husband actually experimented with something totally different first before he started doing e-commerce.
Oh, okay.
And he actually did some internships to learn search engine optimization and figure out how to consult and things like that. And it ended up not working out, which is how he experimented with e-commerce. So it was probably, I would say, a 6 to 8 month process of experimentation and figuring out what works. We are still constantly, thinking about, hey, what else could we be doing to add to our portfolio careers, if you will. So yeah, it was definitely a process, and it wasn't overnight.
Oh, that's great. I'm really impressed. I mean, anyone who works sort of in the online digital space needs to be fairly entrepreneurial and willing to go out and sort of learn things on their own, or else you really can't kind of stay up with the latest trends in digital marketing.
That's right.
Just in general. Well, so I'm curious. I'm sure you've met other people who are also digital nomads, kind of across the board. Are there certain types of people or personality traits that you think would be helpful for someone who wants to become a digital nomad? Like, who's the best suited person to be a digital nomad?
Oh, good question. Well, I actually think that folks, you do have to have a little bit of a taste for risk, right? If you want to know what your life is going to look like every single day, this is not for you. But if there are, you don't have to be like this wild risk taker willing to, sell everything, quit your job, and, all of that. There are shades of gray in between.
Mm-hmm.
For someone, there was a woman who I talked to a while back. She had a full-time job with a design university,
mm-hmm.
and her job was to recruit students for the university. And so they would send her on trips, around the world to, do recruiting. And she found that she was on the road so much that it was sort of a waste for her to be keeping her apartment in Canada. And so she just put all of her stuff in storage. She got rid of her apartment. And when she needs to be back in Canada, she just rents an Airbnb or sublets, a room off of Craigslist for however long she needs to. And then will also just live in different places on the road. And so she still has the benefit of full-time employment, right? It has that stability, but it does have a little bit of that risk, right? Where, she does need to plan ahead and figure out where she's going to be. And, I have to be back in Vancouver. Where am I going to find an apartment to live in? But there's lots of different ways to do it. And so I don't want people who like some stability to feel like it's outside. It's totally just impossible for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It really does. And, I think there are some companies that allow people to work from different places, or like you said, certain jobs where you're just traveling so much that, there's very little time that you're even at home to begin with. I actually have a good friend here in Memphis where I live who is also a digital nomad. And I'll say he's been doing it, I think, for a few years. And for the first year, I didn't quite get what was going on. I really sort of thought he's sort of I didn't know that he was really working. I just thought maybe he's taking a really long vacation. And as we've talked more about it over time, I realized, wow, he started his own business and he does consulting and he's working all the time, but just from these different locations that he's flying to. So I know even for me, as someone who, could potentially work remotely, I think for me, I didn't quite get it in the beginning. And I'm curious, as a digital nomad, what misconceptions do you think there are out there? I mean, what do people think when they hear this?
Yes, there are definitely some misconceptions. In fact, I've talked to other digital nomads too, and we all kind of agree that to other people, it looks like you are on a perma vacation and maybe even not working. And it can be tricky, especially if one of the things that I do is I have to market myself to clients. And so it's this tricky balance of, I want to be able to say, here's where I am, right? I'm exploring this exciting place. I'm learning about the history of this place. But at the same time, you don't want to make it seem like you're not working. I mean, today, in like I said, I'm here in Greenville. I've been parked at the library all day, in the library working. I mean, not every day is a vacation, but especially, you need to be mindful of what you're putting out there on Twitter or on Instagram, right? Like you also want to be able to show, like, hey, here are the projects that I'm working on, or here's a professional accomplishment I'm excited about, not just here's this beautiful beach that I was visiting.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think with my friend, when I finally figured out what he was doing, I was like, wow, he's really got this figured out. Like, everyone else should be doing this too. But it definitely took me a while for it to sink in, because like you said, I just thought he's just on vacation forever.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. I mean, how did you explain it, like, to your family or to your friends who have questions? Like, for someone who's thinking of being a digital nomad, like how did you handle that?
One of the ways that we framed it was, and it wasn't just about framing, it was the truth, was that, we already know how to hold down a 40-plus hour a week, professional full-time job in a city. We know how to do that. We did it for more than a decade. We climbed the ladder, and it just, at a certain point, didn't feel like a challenge anymore. So starting our own businesses, right, being able to start our own business, make those businesses thrive, and also balance that with our personal desires, which are to learn more about the world, see more of the world, meet interesting people. We wanted to see if we could make it work. And, nothing has to be forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like we decided we wanted to try it and see if we could make it work. It's been 2.5 years since we first started trying it, 3.5 if you count our career break when we were just traveling but doing less work.
Mm-hmm. So
far we've been able to sustain it. So I think that making sure that people understand, what your personal motivation is important.
Mm-hmm.
Also, just the reality of our culture, right,
Mm-hmm.
is that if you are doing something that is creating economic value, right, you have a job, or you've started a business or what have you, then if you pair that with, and we're also traveling full time, it's a lot more palatable than to just say, well, we saved up a lot of money and lived cheaply, and now we're traveling full time, right? It just doesn't, just culturally, it doesn't compute. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess they eventually they kind of get it. I mentioned to you, I quit my full-time job, I don't know, a little over 4 years ago, and I had worked in corporate and gone up the ladder and, rung all the bells basically. And I remember when I left my job, I told one of my friends, and he said, "I can't believe you would do that to me." Because I guess he had been kind of following my career for a while, and I thought, wow, I never realized people would have an opinion about this. But I guess they do. So, yeah, but eventually people get it. I think they start to see what you're doing and that you're happy and that you're, not destitute. And I think it starts to make sense. But to change the topic a little bit, I have to ask you, I was reading that you and your husband, Chris, are traveling in a minivan turned camper, and that you've named it Red Delicious.
Yeah.
And I just...
Because she's red. She's red like a red apple.
Yeah. Well, so I'm curious, it sounds like you made sort of a conversion to the van. What did you outfit the van with to make it so that you could travel in it full time and work from the van if you needed to?
Yeah, so we kept our van conversion pretty minimalist and low tech. We have some things like a power inverter so that we can be charging our devices off the battery. We have some extra external batteries. A lot of X's. External batteries that we can charge so that, we can always be using our phones or our laptops. And then we tend to be parked at campgrounds a lot. And surprisingly, a lot of campgrounds have electricity. If not at your site, then at least somewhere, on the premises. Like there might be some kind of like rec room or like a pavilion with electricity. So that's really the big thing. However, we have seen both in person and online wild setups where people will have, solar panels attached to their roof that charge a separate house battery that powers the lights and charges all of their devices and keeps their refrigerator running. there are definitely lots of different directions that people can go in, but we just tend to keep ours pretty low tech because we like being able to just go to a library or a coffee shop or the occasional co-working space and do work from there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What kind of van was it originally before? I mean, was it like a Volkswagen van or, I mean...
No, we have like a legit minivan, like a strap the kids in the back and take them to soccer practice kind of minivan. It's a Kia Sedona. So
cool.
It's actually fairly small. But yes, I mean, you can convert just a small minivan like this. Folks, will sometimes get like a Volkswagen, those Westphalias, the Eurovans, even smaller RVs. It's not uncommon to see folks traveling around and working.
Wow, that's great. So you mentioned a couple of the places that you sometimes work outside of the van. You mentioned like today, it sounds like you're at the library. And you mentioned, I think, coffee shops. Like, are there certain types of places that you look for when you're thinking of where you might work on a particular day?
Yeah, we really like coffee shops because, we like to be able to support local businesses where we can. Also, there's something about a coffee shop, right, where you can be there for a while, right, like a couple hours, maybe 3 hours, right? But you can't be there all day. I mean, you could. That probably no one would say anything. But it's kind of frowned upon, right, unless you're buying drinks every hour or so.
Right.
And so we've actually found that going to coffee shops really encourages us to be efficient, right? Like if you walk into the office and know, okay, I have 8 hours, in my cubicle to get all of these things done. I mean, you're going to take the amount of time that you have, right? And so if you only give yourself 2-3 hours to get everything that needs to get done, then you find, oh my gosh, I can actually be hyper efficient. Now, the one time that, the times that doesn't work are when, particularly for me, sometimes I need to be doing client presentations or webinars, video conferences. And so sometimes if it's just kind of a casual, check-in via video, it's not a big deal to do it in a coffee shop. There's usually plenty of internet bandwidth and the background noise isn't too bad or too distracting. But if I'm giving like a presentation or something like that, that's when we'll either find a paid co-working space where I can actually have a closed office.
Right.
Or we might even rent an Airbnb for a weekend, where I can have some quiet space again to be doing presentations.
Those are some really creative ideas. I wouldn't have thought of that. And is that kind of, one question I had was how you're able to sort of balance this traveling aspect with the work aspect. I mean, is that sort of what you do to make it kind of work together?
Yeah, I mean, it's not always easy, to be honest. And in fact, it's one of the things that we struggled with a lot in the beginning and still struggled with, right? Which is, how do you make sure that you're getting the work done that needs to get done, but that you're also, seeing the place that you're in, right? Like I mentioned, I'm in Greenville. It would be a real shame to only see the inside of Greenville's main public library, right? So, and the key that we found to that is traveling slowly.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, and this is my advice to any aspiring digital nomads. Do not plan on being places for like 2 days. Unless you are actively, unless you're on a road trip and trying to get from point A to point B, in a week or something, it really helps if you can be like, I'm going to be in this city for a week or 2 weeks or a month. And then you don't feel this pressure to go out and see everything every day that you're there, right? You can have a day where it's a work day, or another day where you work in the morning and then go on a bike ride or visit the local farmer's market in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
So having that extended amount of time is really important for getting your work done, for feeling like you're actually getting the most out of your travel, and just for your sanity, your overall sanity.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I have a friend who works remotely, and he works for a remote company, and I remember him telling me it took a while from the time that he transitioned from an office job to a remote job to kind of be comfortable with that system and kind of figure it out, how to manage time when you're working from home. How long did it take you to kind of figure this system out?
Gosh, I mean, there are times when we are still figuring it out, and it's been 2.5 years.
Yeah.
But I would say that we started to figure out a good rhythm at least like about a month or so into it.
Oh, that's good.
Figuring out we put into practice some rules. Like, I tended to have a lot of standing meetings that were conference calls on Mondays. So we created a rule: no travel on Mondays. So if wherever we were on Sunday, we had to be there until Tuesday, because it was just too much to be on the move and having to do conference calls and, we're driving through this remote area and cell service is spotty. Like, that's awful, right? So we knew that was a rule that we came up with that worked for us. Depending on where folks are traveling and how they're traveling, they might need to come up with rules that work for them. There was another couple who I talked to. They together they have this app that they have developed, and he's like the programmer and she's the content expert, and they'll have days where they just they'll even set aside a week where it's like, we're just going to focus on meeting all of these deadlines and we're not going to do any sightseeing. And then the following week, they, let loose a little bit more. And so it really just depends on your own personal motivations and what, how you like to work.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, and it is interesting you compare that, another couple is going to come up with a totally different sort of method of what works best. I mean, you mentioned those are some of the challenges that you had to overcome. I guess I want to ask you about the best parts, but first let me ask you, since we're kind of on this topic, what are some of the worst parts or the difficult parts about being a digital nomad?
Yeah, so there are two things that I think are hard. The first is more because we are self-employed, and it's just unpredictability of income. But that is more a product of being self-employed. And if you were a digital nomad who had a steady job, right, that had a regular paycheck, that would not be an issue. The tougher part that I think affects all digital nomads, no matter how they earn their income, is it's a lot harder to build community when you're constantly on the move. In fact, a former colleague of mine even said to me, he was like, there's a reason why most humans aren't nomadic anymore. And I was like, yeah, that's true. And even humans who are still nomadic, they move around in tribes, right? Like, it's not just you and your partner, or you and your partner and, your children, right?
Right.
Yeah, and so when you're only in a place for a week or a month, you really don't have the opportunity to get to know people. You might meet other travelers. We've certainly met a lot of really interesting people, and we've kept in touch with them on Facebook and things like that. But it's hard to make new friends. So you have to really be vigilant about staying in touch with your friends and family wherever they are.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I'm also self-employed, and so I understand sort of the ups and downs of the financial piece, and it's really different than when you have that
Yeah.
full-time job and the paycheck just automatically goes into your bank account. And I think too, starting a business, a lot of times you don't have that coworker to bounce ideas off of. It's just you, and so you really do have to reach out. I know for me, like my office is located inside a technology incubator, so it's full of other people who are starting businesses, which helps, but they're all different kinds of businesses. So it's not the same kind of community that you get when you're around people who do the exact same sort of work. But I know what you mean in terms of, it's hard to, even if you wanted to have a friend who did something a little different, it's hard because you're not physically with them.
That's right. And let me say a couple of things in response to that I think if folks are considering becoming digital nomads, they should know about this.
Mm-hmm.
First is that there are, other nomads have recognized this as an issue. And so there is definitely an effort to create opportunities for community. So I can't remember the exact name, unfortunately, off the top of my head, but I want to say it's called Nomad House. And what they do is they will actually rent a house somewhere exciting, like Bali, or somewhere, right, for a month, and I think it houses like 10 people, so it's a relatively small community. But what you do is, if you are a digital nomad, you can essentially buy space in that house for that month, and you can travel to that place, live there, and get to be around all of these other digital nomads from around the world. You pay like a month's rent, and it includes internet access, which is like the big thing, right? Everybody needs good internet. And you get to just meet some folks and collaborate with them if you want, or just socialize with them. They're... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's so interesting. It actually makes me think of, there's a woman I know in Memphis here that just returned. She was doing, I think it was like a year working remotely. It was some kind of an organized program that she applied to. And I think they picked about 30 people from all over the world. And they took sort of this like around the world trip, these 30 people together who didn't know each other before, but to apply to do this remote experience, I think it was maybe called, you had to have a virtual job or a remote job.
Yeah.
And so
that's great.
Yeah, it created like a community, and each person came in as an individual, and then they just put them all together, and they had a schedule, I think, of first we're going to this city for a month or a couple weeks, and then we're going to this other city, and they went together, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah. I love it. No, and there are definitely things like that exist. It's basically, you just have to find them, and then, commit to going wherever it is that they're going, right? Yeah. So that is definitely a solution that folks should look into. Another thing that is kind of a version of that, but I think easier to participate in, and that's something that my husband Chris and I do, is joining a goals group or a mastermind group. And so for folks who might not know what that is, it's basically, it could be about anything, but usually they're about 3 to 5, 6 people maybe, and you meet on a regular basis, and it's all focused around some kind of shared goal. So, for instance, the people who we meet with, we meet every other week via phone or video, just depending on the situation. And we're all meeting because we have a goal to have portfolio careers with an entrepreneurial bent. So Yeah, so like my husband and I, we both have our own businesses. One of the other guys in the group, he has a steady job, but he is starting his own side gig that he wants to have happening while he works his job. So he's like starting a business on the side. And then another guy has a part-time job, but he's also a writer working on a book, and he's working on a documentary. And so, like, everybody kind of has lots of different parts of their career that they're trying to keep going. And so we support each other, we set goals, we hold each other accountable for those goals, and it feels like you have colleagues when you don't. Mm-hmm. That's the big thing.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm definitely, I like the idea of the mastermind group, and I'm familiar with it. If we're listening and we're interested to maybe join a mastermind or start one, or maybe let's say join one, where do you recommend that we go out and look for a mastermind group? Like, how did you find your group?
Oh, that's a good question. So it was actually one of the other guys who's in the group. He just said, I want to start one. And he started reaching out to people that he knows that have similar goals. And then we just started one. I wish I knew, but I don't actually know how to find an existing mastermind group, because I don't know that people necessarily publicize them. Mm-hmm. But, it's something that you could start with, even just you and one other person. So if you wanted to find someone, in your current network, whether it's, through your community on your network on LinkedIn, or just through your own personal network, if you wanted to let friends or family know, like you're looking for other people who are trying to start their own business, or who are, trying to figure out how to retire early, or whatever your goal is, mm-hmm. I think that that's a good way to start. And there are a lot of resources online for how to organize your mastermind group. And I think you can just start by Googling, how does a mastermind group work? That's a good place to start.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. I actually, not long ago, had a friend reach out to me and say, hey, Angela, let's maybe start a mastermind group for solopreneurs. And I hadn't really considered that. And so we only met once so far, so we'll see if it keeps going. But everyone that was invited to come had started their own business and works as a one-person, shop. Some of the folks have an office or a business, and some, are digital nomads or just work from home. And so, but it was interesting because you have all these sort of like-minded people at the table who can say, I get it, and I know what you're going through. And it's a really nice feeling.
I love it. Yeah, it's great. And, sometimes everybody has to, you don't have to be there, right? And so everyone has to be motivated to be there. And that's what makes it great, right? Is that people are doing it because they want to be there, not because they're being forced to do some professional development thing. Right?
Right, yeah.
And so because of that, everybody gets what they put into it. That's mm-hmm. what I'll say.
Well, so these are some of the good parts of being a digital nomad and kind of working on your own and working remotely. What are some of the other things that you really like about it? Like, what makes you continue to choose this lifestyle each day? Like, what is it that you really love about it?
The biggest thing is flexibility. My husband and I, we often talk about gosh, would we ever go back to, working a mm-hmm. full-time job? And never say never, right? Because, mm-hmm. I could see a future where one or both of us do, but I also could see a future where we don't. Having the flexibility to organize your time the way you see fit, mm-hmm. right? If you're having a day where you're like, I just woke up on the wrong side of the bed today, I've got a lot on my mind, and today I want to, spend time, going on a walk or going on a bike ride, or, a couple weeks ago, so I'm learning how to play the ukulele, and it's very, it's just really nice to actually like sit and, I'll find a tutorial on YouTube and try to master that song in a day. And it's a really nice way. It's nice to be able to have control over your time like that, so that on the days where you're like, I am pumped and ready to go and motivated, like you could spend all day working that day, or you could spend 2 hours working that day. I mean, of course, you have your deadlines that you need to adhere to, but it really lets you go with your own flow, if you will.
Yeah, I think...
No, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think once you get that kind of flexibility, it's hard to imagine that you never had it before, or like...
I know.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine going back.
It does. It is hard to imagine going back. I mean, having a regular paycheck is lovely. Although the one thing that I will say, and we have a financial planner who we work with, and who we worked with when even before we made this shift. And his whole thing is, he was like, he always tells us these stories. It's almost like he was encouraging us to do this, although I'm sure that sometimes when we talk to him, he is probably like, oh, what are you doing? This goes against all of my advice. But he tells us stories about people who, saved and saved and saved and worked and worked and worked and waited to live until they'd saved enough, until they were ready to retire, only to find out, cancer, or for something to happen to their partner, or something awful. And I don't want to, be like, sound like the boogeyman or anything, right? I mean, it's not always that something horrible like this could happen. But I mean, I feel like everybody has heard these stories of like the person who had just retired and then drops dead or gets hit by a bus. We even hear stories like that about, people who, like, right after college graduation, struck by tragedy, right? There are no guarantees in life, and no, you shouldn't live like there's no tomorrow. We do need to be responsible, but making a decision to live today, to not just devote all of your time to work, but to actually work to live, it takes a mindset.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, I think, it takes a lot of courage to pursue what you're really interested in. But what you're describing, it's not just a careless decision. It's a calculated decision. It's a choice, and you figured out how to make this work financially. You didn't just quit your job and, got a van to see what would happen. Like, it seems like very planned out, so you knew you had a pretty good chance of success to do this.
Yeah. And giving yourself, especially, if you are becoming a digital nomad and you already have, a job in place that's a remote job, that's one thing. But anytime you're starting a new business, or even just making a career change, right? You need to give yourself some runway. It's not going to happen overnight. So asking yourself, what am I willing? How much time am I willing to devote? Like, will I give myself a year to reach a certain goal, right? Like, I have to be profitable in a year, or I have to have at least one steady client after 6 months, or, whatever goal is appropriate for you. It makes sense to do that, to give yourself that time, so that you're not just like, oh my gosh, like, it's not working out, I'm giving up, and I'm just going to go back to what I was doing before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, stuff takes time. It takes a lot of time. So I just have to mention one thing, because you mentioned how you kind of divide up your time and, learning to play a musical instrument and being able to prioritize. This is going to sound silly, but
no, it's okay.
Yeah, for me, the way that one of the first things I did when I became sort of a solopreneur was I started going to the grocery store on like Tuesday morning when no one else was at the grocery store. And instead of fighting traffic and fighting lines and all these things, I would organize my shopping and things that I would normally have to race around after work and do. I would maybe once a month, I would take off a full day of work and just prioritize, I'm going to do any shopping, I'm going to take care of any errands, anything I need to do, I'm going to do it then. And it was just the whole stress level of doing those things was so different than when I had to rush around on like Friday afternoon or, Sunday evening or, sometime when the grocery store is just packed full of people. And I think maybe like a week or two ago, I was talking to a friend. They called me on Friday at like 4 p.m. and they were super excited. And they said, we're so excited. Our boss let us leave early. And I thought, God, I'm so glad I don't have to ask my boss to let me leave early. And that if I need to leave early, I'm an adult and I can make that decision and I leave. And it's such a mind shift. And it's like you're taking over the responsibility of your own time and your own priorities in a way that you really can't when you work in a corporate job, I think. Or like a corporate job that's in an office. Yeah.
That's totally true.
Yeah. So you started your own business. Your husband has his own business. But what if we're listening and we're not quite up to starting our own business, but we want to get a remote job or a virtual job? Like, how do you have tips that, you might suggest to someone in terms of how to find that kind of work?
Yeah. So there are, there's trying to think of the best way to package this, if you will. So the options that you have are, one, get a job that offers, 100% telecommuting. And so those, you would just have to look, in regular job boards, right? There are sites like Flex Jobs that I think are meant to be primarily telecommuting jobs. Also consider, talking to your employer. I mean, there may be a precedent for it within your organization. So it's not, it's going to vary from employer to employer, but don't overlook that as a possibility, especially if, you have a long history there. And they may be willing to be like, we'd rather not lose you. So that's one option. The second option is looking for a job that requires a lot of travel. Like I had mentioned that woman who worked for the design university. And finding those types of jobs, I think it might be a little bit more difficult just because I don't know what the search term is, right? But that, I just wanted to flag that as an option because maybe it's not a 100%, remote position, but it's something that would allow you to do more travel. And then the other thing, if you're not ready to just start your own business, you could start looking for gigs or odd jobs that you could do online. Like there are all of these freelance sites like Upwork, for instance, that offer short-term gigs. You can look on places like Craigslist, again, like finding ways to find some short-term gigs that you can do online might be a good way to just get your feet wet and see, how you like it. And, while you're traveling, right, especially if you're traveling slowly, if you're going to be in a town for a month, you might even be able to pick up in-person gigs. Right. So especially if it's something that would only happen, over the course of a week, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the things that someone could look for if they're not ready to start their own business.
Yeah, I have to say, I love the website Upwork, and I do recommend it to people as well. I've used it a couple times, like when I needed help with things like research, and I just haven't myself had the time to do it.
Yeah.
You go out there and you can search, and there are all different kinds of service providers, from writers to researchers to virtual assistants to lawyers. So it's all kinds of professions that could be done from any location. So I wouldn't think like, oh, that's not the site for me. I would, go to a few sites like that, but dig deep, because there's all sorts of jobs there. I mean, you'd be really surprised. Yeah, and the one other thing you mentioned in terms of the search term. So what I've found, like Indeed is a really good place to look. And instead of location, in the location field, when you search, instead of searching for like Dallas, you put the word remote. And if you type the word remote, it'll bring up jobs that are specifically saying that they're kind of work from anywhere jobs. So I think that can be, yeah,
good tip.
Yeah, that's the one that I've found that it seems to work. But I think my big fear for people is that sometimes there are sort of spam or scam sort of jobs listed as remote or virtual. And, I think it's especially important that we be careful, when we're approaching those. I don't know if you have any tips on how you would suggest avoiding those scam jobs, but I do think it's important to be aware that they're out there.
Yeah, I think the big thing is if it really sounds too good to be true, then it probably is,
mm-hmm.
right? I actually just met a couple the other day, and one of the things that gave them the courage to become digital nomads and start traveling by van was that she had gotten a LinkedIn message from a recruiter that was looking for someone to do 15 hours of work a week, categorizing content.
Hmm.
Basically, I feel like I'm going to mess up the description, but I if I have it right, it was basically that, helping to like train the algorithm for some search engines is basically it. Like eventually a human being has to be involved somewhere in the process. And her immediate thing was like, oh, is this real? I don't know. But she talked, she emailed with them, she talked with them, and she felt confident that it was a real, legit opportunity. And it didn't, none of those warning signs were there, right? Like it didn't require her to pay money up front to be part of it, right? It didn't have anything like, oh, you're paid only if these following things happen, right? Like if the work that you do leads to a sale or something like that. So it didn't have any of those warning signs. And there are some, remote positions that do tend to be more commission-based, right? Especially ones that are more about online marketing and generating leads. So, not saying that commission-based jobs are scams, right? It's just, you need to be looking at those sorts of things when evaluating opportunities like that.
No, I think those are great tips because, we want to be smart about our decisions, but we also don't want to get scared away from this idea.
Right.
Well, so I'm curious. I have one very last question, and I'm going to share this in the show notes, which is, where can we go to learn more about you and to learn about your book?
Yeah, so let's see. So you can learn more about our travels on our van blog, which is nomadswithavan.com. And on there, we have a lot of advice about how to travel and work full-time by van. So we have a lot of advice there. My consulting business is at wellroundedcoms.com. And my book, which is part of my portfolio career, is at awesomesupervisoryskills.com.
Oh, that's great. Well, Tamara, thank you so much for joining me. This was excellent.
Thank you, Angela. I had a lot of fun, and I really hope that if any of you out there are listening and thinking about becoming a digital nomad, it's a lot of fun. It's really different. And even if you don't do it forever, you will not regret it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everyone for listening. And thanks to those of you who sent me questions. You can send me your questions to angela@copelandcoaching.com. You can also send me questions via Twitter. I'm at Copeland Coach. And on Facebook, I'm Copeland Coaching. Don't forget to help me out. Subscribe on iTunes and leave me a review.
Thank you for listening to the Copeland Coaching Podcast today with your host, Angela Copeland. Tune in next time to get more great tips on turning your job search into a slam dunk.